And so we are to continue from question number 4. And it says, how does positive analysis differ from normative analysis? So how does positive and differ from normative analysis? So now we may be aware that when you're looking at macroeconomics, just economics in general, there are mainly two major ways of looking at it. You can look at it from this end, which is the positive, analysis. You can analyze the economy positive. I know the positive analysis. Now, when you are doing the positive analysis, this is what you actually look at, right? What do you look at when you're looking at the positive analysis? This is where you look at things the way how they are. You look at issues, exactly the way how they are. You look at issues or things the way they are, right? The way they are. That's how you analyze. So in short, when we're looking at positive thinking, this is where, or the positive analysis, you accept the truth the way how it is. Here, statements can actually be tested, right? They can be tested or proven right or wrong using scientific methods, right? You can use scientific methods to test whether these statements really make sense or they don't make sense. When you're looking at positive analysis is very objective, right? Super objective and very direct to the point. But on the other hand, you have normative. Instead of looking at things the way how they are, actually here, you look at things the way how they should be, or the way how the issues ought to be, right? That's how you look at issues, not really the way how they are. For example, the government should actually, provide the free education to all Zambians because we are a developing country. When you look at that statement, it's mixed there, right? There's an opinion in that statement. So the opinionated statements actually support normative analysis. So use your opinions. You tell us what you're thinking ought to happen. Then on the other hand, we also have got this one, which is much more interesting, right? What is interesting about the normative statement is that these cannot be proven. You can't prove them using scientific methods. You can't prove them right or wrong. There is no proving here of these opinions. And actually, they are subjective instead of being objective. The positive statements are objective, but these are subjective. So in a nutshell, this is what the question required one to do, right? The question required one to do that. As we are moving forward, I think it's important for us to look at question number 8, because now that slowly starts boiling into or adding to our bigger conversation that we are looking at. Perhaps let's start from question number 8, which says, define the gross domestic product, GDP, and explain how it is actually measured. We want to look at GDP, gross domestic product. Now, GDP are just the initials, right? These are initials that actually for gross, right? Gross domestic product. Gross domestic product, GDP. Gross domestic product. That is what it is. So gross domestic product, GDP, is basically also one of the the measures of national income. We are using this measure to measure how the economy of the country is, whether this economy is doing fine or is doing bad. That is properly measured using, positive, using GDP, the gross domestic product, GDP. Okay, so that's what GDP is like. These are in short now telling us what it is. GDP basically is a measure, should be defined as a measure, right? Is a measure of the goods and the services produced within, the country boundaries, or within the specified country, okay, during a given period of time. Right? This is usually regardless of the owners of the factors of production. This is very important to notice. This is where everything now starts from. And you need to get this. So it's a measure of the market value, right? This one, let's write it. It's the measure of the market value. So basically measuring the market value of the goods and the services that you produce within the country boundaries, right? The location should be within the country boundary. So we are concerned about production taking place within the country boundary. And this should actually be during a given period of time. Now, this should be regardless of the persons owning the factors of production. So at this point, we are trying to communicate that it should not actually matter who owns the factors of production, or actually who is the owner of these factors of production. Maybe just a quick reminder on the factors of production. Are you able to remember 1 or 2, 3 factors of production? Able to mention 1 or 2, 3? Hello? Are you mentioning 1 or 2 factors of production that you can remember? Anyone can turn on their mic, the factors of production. You can just, yes.
Hello, sir.
Yes, you can go ahead.
Yes, I think we have land, capital, raw materials.
Capital, land, capital, right? What else do we have? Labor. And entrepreneurship. Right? These are the prominent factors of production that we are aware of. We know that from land, we get rent, isn't it? From capital, we get interest. That's what we explained in the circular flow of income. From labor, you get wages and salaries. And from entrepreneurship, you get profits. Now, these are the factors of production that we have communicated. So here, when you talk about GDP, we don't care who owns, whether the person owning the factors of production is a national or is not a national. Who is a national? A citizen of the country. So is a person owning the factors of production, a citizen of this particular country, or isn't a citizen, right? Is he a citizen? Is she a citizen? That is your question. But here we are saying, when you're looking at GDP, it doesn't matter whether the person is a citizen or is not a citizen of the country. So in the context of Zambia, right, you could have maybe the Chinese producing But whatever they produce, the total value being produced by them, as long as the production is taking place within Zambia, then that is captured by GDP. I want you to pay attention to this because very soon we are going to have other bigger conversations. You need to understand that. So we are saying that the message here is that the production takes place within the country boundaries. So we are caring so much about where the production is taking place, not really who owns the factors of production during that production process. Okay, that is what GDP is. And the key word is that it's a measure of the market. So we are measuring the market value actually of whatever goods are being produced. So all the goods that you produce as a country, they have to be captured, their value, their final value, the market value of the final goods and services, not the intermediate goods, but we are talking about the final goods and the services that you have the final value, the market value, right? That is captured by GDP. And basically the measure of that, the same is what we call the gross domestic product, GDP. Okay? Have you known what GDP is? We are going to talk about how we measure it. Are we good? Even the services that you produce, they are values, they are usually captured. Okay, now let's go ahead, if you have understood this one, and hold another part of the question, which says, let's hold a conversation on this part. It says, explain how it is measured, GDP. Now, there are three prominent methods that are used to measure GDP. I want you to pay attention. Three approaches of measuring GDP. What are the three approaches used to measure GDP? Number one, you can use GDP. You can measure GDP using the value-added approach. I'll explain this. You can also use the expenditure approach. And you can use the income approach. Now, all these three methods, they have to give you the one value, like the same value. They have to give you the same value, and you need to come or to reach at the same conclusion, right? Depending on the data that you've been given in the question, then you can compute. So now, on value added, by the way, on each of these, there are examples that are done and exam questions, right? On each of these approaches, they are very detailed. So we will be looking at them one by one, like in details, not just on stats. Super, super detailed. These are the three measures of GDP, right? These are the three measures of GDP that I'm trying to actually explain to this, this class, okay? The value-added approach, we are just capturing the value that has been added at each stage of production. There will be examples that we're going to do just on the value-added approach. So for you to have an understanding of how it is computed and how questions are phrased. Expenditure approach, this one, this is where you measure GDP. You say GDP actually is equal to, or should be equal to, consumption, whatever you consume, plus whatever you invest, plus government expenditure, plus exports minus imports. That difference. The consolidation of these four is what gives you the gross domestic product, GDP. Okay, so GDP is basically the sum of these. 1, 2, 3, 4. That is expenditure approach. In short, you are trying to measure how much have you spent. Like basically, we are looking at the measurements from the expenditure point of view. How much have we spent? How much have we spent on consumption? By this time around consumption, we're not just talking about eating. Whatever you spend on your own, on yourself, as long as you have not spent it for investment or for saving, usually this is for consumption. For example, you're buying whatever you're buying for yourself or for yours, please, that's consumption, right? That's why there is domestic consumption. Individuals buy, families buy things, they buy clothes, you buy utilities, you buy utensils, you buy cars, you buy whatever you buy, that's still consumption, right? That's the context in which you look at consumption. It's not just about what you are eating, okay? Including what you are eating is still part of consumption. So you measure everything that has been consumed by the citizens of the country. You capture not only by the citizens, sorry, by everybody within the country boundaries. And then you look at the investments that have been made, both by the private individuals and by the private guys and the government as well. Remember, the government also makes expenditures where the government spends a lot. Actually. So you capture everything that the government is spent on as well. Then you add the difference between exports and imports. Then when you consolidate all those values, these are huge values, they're in millions, usually. They're big values. Then that gives you gross domestic product, GDP. That's the expenditure part. There are examples that are here. Like many of them, we are going to do them. Then you'll get to understand how to do the expenditure approach. When you're measuring, it looks at, okay, where is the income or what is the total income of these people, occupying this region in the country boundaries. Let me just confirm you are able to hear me before I continue. We're looking at the income approach, right? Now we want to look at the income approach of measuring GDP. Now, in a nutshell, when you talk about the income approach, what you're trying to look at is that, okay, you are trying to identify the income of the country, right? Where people are getting the income from. So it starts from the factors of production. We mentioned them as land. We said something like labor. We talked about, after labor, we talked about capital. We had also said something about entrepreneurship, right? Now, these are the 4 factors of production, but we get incomes from these. We get rent, right? We get wages or salaries. We get interest from these investments, capital, and we get profits from entrepreneurship. Now, when you consolidate all these, all the rents, the rentals, the rent payments that are made or collected by your landlords and landladies, right? The owners of these assets, plus the wages themselves, okay? Plus the wages themselves, plus the interest, right? Plus the interest that you get from those investments that you make as an individual, as as the public, as we make all these investments. In short, we are consolidating both for individuals, for firms, for everybody in the economy, including the organizations, whatever investments they are doing, okay? Now, we add together whatever activities around entrepreneurship are done, leading to someone gaining some profits as well. We want to capture all that profit that they make. So these are the incomes, the rent, the wages, the interest, and profits. And this is what we have always been training the students, all right? We have told them that when you graduate out of the university, this is your focus. Hello, before I make this point, is the class able to hear me? Can you see the screen? Please confirm you are able to hear me and you can see the screen. Hello?
I'm able to hear you, sir.
But
All right, that's fine. Thank you. So now, we have told the students that when you go out in the real world, please, you're not going to work for a salary or for a wage. We're training you to go and look for what? For income. Work for income. Don't limit yourself. We tell them not to limit themselves to a salary alone, but we are telling them to go and look for income. Why do we teach them to look for income? It's because we understand properly that, wages or salary is just one way of earning, actually, one factor of production, which is labor. You understand? When you give your services or you give your services as an individual, then you get a salary or get a wage, you get paid by it. But that's not the only way of earning. People can earn from rentals, right? Raise or erect some assets. Then you can earn from rentals. It should be the targets of all of them. Moving across all these, right? You can also make investments, buy maybe, for example, shares in other companies, make investments and earn some interest from these investments as well. This is also part of the incomes. And there is also entrepreneurship where people enterprise and make some profits from their businesses and from their firms as well. It's also one way of earning. So they are told not to limit themselves around here, like around labor, but they can think of ensuring that they are earning, if possible, in all these other ways, because all these make up income, right? You could have some investments around land, or that, by the way, by land, we mean everything that is on land, premises, buildings, it could be buildings, infrastructure, all that. It falls under land. Yeah. So we have capital, all manner of investments and entrepreneurship, all manner of businesses that you're conducting here and earn some profit. So this is the message we have been sending across. So now, when you're talking about the income approach, we are just consolidating all these forms of income that the nation has earned at large, including, we start from individuals, the firms, and the government itself, all manner of these, these incomes that are mentioned here are put together, and then we say this is the income. Actually, this is the total income. The total income that has been raised, it is arguably said to be equal to expenditure, to the total expenditure, because yes, you can only spend what you have. So yeah, believe that whatever people have spent is equal to their income, right? That is an argument. So that's why we say expenditure approach and the income approach, value added approach, they all give you the same value or the same way of measuring. It's only that the data in the question is the one that will guide you what approach to use. This time around, I pop questions. Is there any question? Anyone can turn on their mic and just ask the question. If at all they have any questions. Hello? Colleagues, do we have any questions? Okay. Are you able to hear me? Can you see the screen? We progress.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, let's proceed then. Now we can actually move all the way from question number 9 to question number 12. I am moving with this because they're calculated. I want the conversation that is coordinated, organized. Question number 12 is saying, how does the gross domestic product differ from national products? Now, it's between GDP and GNP. Now, listen carefully. If you remember carefully from what I said when we were defining GDP, I emphasized on two key aspects. I said it is the measure of the final market value of the goods and the services produced within the country boundaries, okay? Of course, within that stipulated period of time, usually 1 year. So now, that is what we communicated, and this is a message we sent. We emphasize that this is regardless of who owns the factors of production. I want you to pay attention. That is about GDP. So we don't care who owns the factors of production. We just care about where the production is taking place. Whether those who are producing, they are the Chinese, they're the Americans, the Britons, you know, they're South Africans. We don't care whether those that are producing, Angolans, they're Burkinabe, and, Nigerians. We cannot. What we care about is the production is taking place within our country. That is GDP. But when it comes to GNP, it is interesting. This one is a measure of the final value, right? The final actually market value of goods, right? And the services produced not within the country boundaries, but by the nationals. This is interesting. By the nationals. That's all. So we are interested in the nationals producing. So here we are caring much about who is owning the factor of production. This is now regardless of where the production is taking place. Regardless of where the production is taking place, we don't care. Now, we are just concerned about who owns the factor of production. And this time around, we're just capturing what our citizens, our own citizens actually are producing. Do you get that one? What our own citizens are producing. Our own citizens. That's what we capture. Okay? Regardless of the location, whether, we have got Zambians, for example, that own assets, they own, they earn incomes from, these other countries. They own land, others own infrastructure, own assets outside the country, in other countries. And they do production, they do produce in there. They have all those international companies and they're busy there doing business out in the other countries. We are interested in the production by our own people. So as long as those people are Zambians, we capture what they are doing in the GNP. So gross national product, we just concentrate on what our own people have produced. This is regardless of where the production actually occurs from. But we don't care about the production, of course. We just care so much about who owns the factor of production. And here we're just concentrating on what our people own, right? On what our people own. Any questions? Are we good? Have you underscored the difference? Now you know the difference, right? You know the difference between GDP and GNP, which is actually a good thing, right? But I'll move quickly to question number 12 before I'll revert. Don't worry, we'll have other questions that will capture these other things. I want the conversation to be related. On question number 15, it says, can you differentiate nominal GDP from real GDP? Is there any difference between nominal GDP and real GDP? Now, listen carefully. We have already talked about GDP. The nominal GDP, this one, it just captures the market value of the goods without factoring in inflation, right? It does not account for inflation. So remember how to capture this. We just multiply price times quantity. That's how you do the production. Plus, you do the summation of this price times quantity of the product, price times how much of that product, and we are adding together everything. This is the nominal GDP, right? We are capturing or we are measuring this at the current year prices. So we use current year values and we use the current year prices, current year quantities and current year prices to measure this GDP. It's called the nominal GDP. We'll do a practical example for you to know what nominal GDP really is and what's the difference. Then on the real GDP, here, this one, it does not measure, doesn't do the measurement using the current year prices, but it uses the base year prices to capture GDP. It uses the current year quantities, CQ, that is for current year quantities, and also the base year prices for BP. That's what it does. That's the real GDP. What is the base year? You are concerned about why base year? Base year, what is base year, right? So now, base year prices refers to, the base year refers to the year of reference, right? We want to see the prices of the goods have been increasing, but can we really inflate our GDP by factoring in all these prices that are up, and we measure these values by the prices that are increasing? Remember, the quantities can be fixed. Huh? It is quantity times price. The quantities can be fixed, which means there is no production, no new production has taken place. But as long as the prices have gone up, you can still see as if, the level of production has gone up, but in an actual sense, nothing of such a kind has happened. So you find that there has not been any improvement, there hasn't been any increase of such a nature. And having said all these things, this is the message I am now sending across. I send this message, should be the price times the quantities of the goods and services. Price times the quantity. Now, when you're looking at the real GDP, you need to use the year of reference. We want to go back in the past and look at these measurements, the measurements of these current year quantities with the prices that are back in the, you want to use the prices for the other years, the previous years, so that you can really get to understand whether the quantities have increased themselves or just the prices that were inflating the GDP. And that's what you do when you're dealing with it. So the prices that you use are for the years of, you could be, for example, in 2024, right? And then you can use the prices of 2021. You want to see how prices have changed 2021 to 2024. And when you use the year of reference prices or the prices of the base year to measure, this GDP, the GDP you produce is called the real GDP. Any questions? Are there any questions? We know the calculations, we do a lot of computations around this. And I know when you do computations, you will be happy because you'd have actually gained this much more understanding. So basically, in a nutshell, as we summarize, what we've been talking about today. Today, we introduced the concept of the two ways of analyzing, of doing analysis in economics. We talked about positive analysis and normative analysis and how different they are from each other. That's what we said. We had time to define GDP, gross domestic product, and actually invested some time and energy to just explain how it is measured and the approaches that you can actually use to measure GDP. I spent time to talk about those approaches that you use to measure GDP. And actually from there, we moved on and showed the difference between GDP and GNP, the gross domestic product versus the gross national product, GNP. And you needed to see the difference between the two. The difference was clearly drawn. And then from there, we moved on and differentiated between nominal GDP and the real GDP. That was the conversation we had. And I promised the class that as we keep on holding these conversations, we have just introduced them theoretically a bit because you really need this. And then as we very soon will start the computations, for example, the approaches used to measure GDP one by one, and we'll do serious computations there. And then you'll be happy. That's what I actually promised the class. Any questions?